let's talk about our strategic portfolio. For some of your money, your goal behind that money is likely, I want to keep this money safe. But safety is an interesting concept. If we were to travel back in time 30 years, we could have been standing around and we could have had a quarter in our hand. We might have been debating, do we want to purchase a can of soda, or do we want to put that quarter in a piggy bank? If we put it in the piggy bank, we could fast forward to today, we could take out a hammer and we could crack open that piggy bank. And lo and behold, that quarter would still be there, but I would argue it wasn't safe. I was in the airport the other day, I spent $2 for a bottled water. So when we think about safety, we interpret that as preserving purchasing power over time. So if we're discussing purchasing power over time, I want to draw you one of my favorite graphs. This is one of my favorite graphs because it is 3 graphs in one. The first graph that this represents is the purchasing power of the US dollar over the last 100 years. My wife has a grandmother. She lives in the suburbs of Chicago. She's 97 and she is doing great. When she was younger, she married a baker, and she actually remembers buying a loaf of bread for 5 cents. Over the last 100 years, the purchasing power of US dollars down an astonishing 97%. The second graph that this represents is the purchasing power of the US dollar in the last 35 years. In that time period, the US dollar is down about 50%. The third graph that this represents is the purchasing power of the US dollar since the year 2000. Since the year 2000, it's down about 25%, and that includes the upswing we saw in 2014. So if we're trying to preserve purchasing power over time, I would argue there are only 4 things you need to be worried about. When we think about the dollar, we can have periods where the dollar is strong and strengthening. Alternatively, we could have periods where the dollar is weak and weakening. On this side, we're concerned about inflation. We could have periods where inflation is low. Alternatively, we could have periods where inflation is high. When the US dollar is strong, you likely do great with US dollar-backed bonds, much like the bonds you own today. If, on the other hand, the US dollar is weak, you likely do better with a basket of bonds backed by international currencies, the yen, the euro, pesos, really a collection of all the currencies in the world aside from the US dollar when the US dollar is weak. Now, when inflation is low, you likely do fine with plain vanilla bonds. But when inflation is high, you likely do better with inflation-protected bonds, bonds that pay you more during periods of high inflation. So if you look at your current portfolio and you were to strip out all of the assets that you would mentally put in your safety bucket, you would strip out all of your bonds and I'd say that's great. But when we look at those bonds, I would argue that 100% of your bonds are backed by US dollars. You likely have 0 international bonds. Further, you likely have 75 to 100% plain vanilla bonds. You likely have very low exposure to inflation-protected bonds. That means that you are positioned for one of the 4 outcomes, the strong dollar, low inflation outcome. You are unprepared for 3 of the 4 outcomes. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I do know that in the past, each of these 4 quadrants has had their day in the sun. So at Beta Frontier, we like to position our portfolios for a wide range of outcomes, and we have investments in all 4 quadrants. We are maximizing our diversity and taking our best shot at preserving purchasing power over time. And this is our strategic portfolio.